Sounds good. Well, welcome to the Tuesday, May 5th, 2020 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Planning Commission. This meeting is in accordance with executive orders from the governor to effect social distancing and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 virus. We intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. However, please be patient if there are technical issues. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 877-853-5247. That's 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 921-1722-6228. That's 921-1722-6228. This information is also available on the published agenda, in the public notices section of the city website, and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. And we will start the meeting with a roll call.
Commissioner Woods. Commissioner Briggs.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Milstein.
Here.
Commissioner Gabe Randall.
Here.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Abrams.
Here.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Here.
Full attendance and quorum.
Great. Do we have any introductions this evening?
We do not.
Great. Do I have a commissioner that will move the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Ackerman, seconded by Commissioner Mills. Any discussion or changes regarding the agenda?
I would just note we did place the solar UDC amendments as unfinished business. You actually haven't discussed them because they were on the first meeting that had to be rescheduled because of the COVID stay-at-home order. So that might look a little funny too, but that's why it's appearing that way.
Great, thanks. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, the agenda is approved. Moving on to minutes of previous meetings. Before us this evening, we have the April 21st, 2020 meeting minutes. Do you have a commissioner that will move those? Moved by Commissioner Wood, seconded by Commissioner Abrams. Any discussion or changes to the minutes? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Those are approved. Moving on to reports from city administration, city council, planning manager, planning commission officers and committees, and written communications and petitions. We'll begin with Commissioner Ackerman with a report from city council. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. City Council had a long agenda that we moved through with great haste, but prudence and responsibility. First, a set of rezonings relevant to this body. We rezoned a single family township parcel, about ½ acre, to R1A at 715 Heather Way. It was a voluntary annexation. We also rezoned just over an acre of land on East Eisenhower to become new parkland. We did the same with 16 acres on Duvarn Road, the Buttonbush nature area, as well as 1.5 acres on South Maple, and 2 acres on Dillon Drive, the Hickory nature area, 25 acres, a huge addition, on Green Road, in addition to the Oakwoods nature area, and finally just under ½ an acre on oh, and I'm sorry, that was all of the additions to our parkland and annexations. We also had before us the rezoning and site plan of the Garnet. However, we postponed that to line up the rezoning and site plan on the same agenda. With respect to kind of the city's emergency COVID response, 2 items of relevance to this body. The first is that the city released $250,000 to support the county and the shelter assistance work to provide homeless sheltering that also respects the needs for social distancing to reduce the spread of the virus. And the second is City Council also passed a resolution directing staff to begin first a pilot phase and then a full implementation of allowing street closures to promote safe recreation on streets so that pedestrians and cyclists have more space to operate freely in our roadways. And then finally, of relevance, a few sidewalk gaps being filled that I know this body is keen and interested in. A couple on Barton Drive, one on Nixon and Traver, and one on Florida Court. That is everything.
Great, thank you. Mr. Leonard, do you have a report for us this evening?
Sure, a couple of brief items. We have scheduled for the May 12th working session. We'll be bringing City Planner Jill Thatcher has taken up the gauntlet of the proposed outdoor lighting ordinance that has been worked on by a couple of planning commissioners and energy commission members. So we're going to be bringing that back for working session on the 12th. I also want to just let the planning commission know we are entering sort of a unique circumstance in that the governor's flexibility with Open Meetings Act is about to expire more quickly than stay-at-home order is. And so I will keep you apprised as we move forward with both the working session. I anticipate the working session will stay on as digital, but after that, as we've always been doing, we've been publishing meetings to be held either virtually or in person as the circumstances provide for. There's a single location on the city's website where you can always check in to see what the status of those meetings are. If they move to an in-person meeting, we'll be conducting those meetings with every care to respect social distancing. So I'll keep you apprised as we start moving into future phases of that, but it's probably somewhere on the horizon.
Great.
And that's all.
Thank you. Planning Commission officers and committees. Does anyone have a report? Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I just thought I would update folks that the ORC did meet last Tuesday, and we talked about two things, planned project modifications, and Alexis has done a great deal of work kind of putting some proposals forward. And so I can't remember what the next step is, if it's going to come to all of us or come back to ORC, but I think there's lots of progress there. And this is something that we talked about a lot. So she did a good job at like taking all of our random comments and putting them together. So, and then we also talked about a whole list of minor changes to the UDC. We talked about this at the end of the last meeting where we heard a couple things from public comment and from Commissioner Ackerman about the ADUs and kind of the Scrivener's error that happened there for the R2A districts. But there's apparently quite a list, it's a, I don't know, about a dozen of those similar kind of things. So we met, it looks good. I'm expecting that we'll see that stuff soon.
Great, thank you. Any other Planning Commission officers and committee reports? All right, seeing none. Written communications and petitions. We received 2 items and one came in just like within the last hour and a half or so. So please take a look at that. That came through via email from Mia. And then now we move on to audience participation. This is a time for anyone in our audience to address the Planning Commission. If you'd like to address the Planning Commission, you'll have up to 3 minutes to address any subject that is not on our agenda for this evening. If you'd like to make a public comment, please call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 921-1722-6228. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address for the record at the beginning of your comments. Do we have any audience participation this evening?
Thus far, nobody's raising their hand. Let's just give it a few moments. Nope, I see no indication.
All right, thank you. Moving on to public hearings scheduled for our next business meeting.
For our next meeting on May 19th, we have 2 public hearings scheduled. The first is for 2800 Jackson Road Hotels. This is a rezoning and site plan for city council approval. It's a proposal to rezone a approximately 4.5 acre vacant parcel from R5 hotel motel to C3 fringe commercial and construct 2 new hotels with about 133,000 square feet of new floor area. And then we have another scheduled public hearing to consider proposed amendments to Chapter 55, the Unified Development Code, Section 5.24, signs, to update and modernize requirements for signage in the city of Ann Arbor.
Very exciting, very exciting. I'm looking forward to that meeting. All right, moving on to unfinished business. The first item before us this evening is 3611 to 3621 Plymouth Road rezoning site plan with planned project modifications for city council approval and special exemption use drive-through facility for city planning commission approval. We will begin this with a petitioner presentation. They'll have up to 10 minutes to address the planning commission. And then we will have a staff report. And then after that, we will go into a public hearing and then discussion. So I will let the petitioner start the presentation as they are entering the room. So I'll give them just a quick minute to enter the room and then we'll begin the presentation.
Actually, I think as they've already provided a presentation when this came before you prior, I think Alexis is probably just going to summarize what's happened since then, if that's okay with the commission.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, Alexis, go ahead.
Thanks. I will summarize and catch everyone up to speed. If we have signals crossed and the petitioner's team would like to add more, we can turn it over to them, and then I can take it back for more of my staff recommendation. All going with the flow. But as mentioned, this is the Plymouth MMG Plymouth Road Mixed Use Project. It is a collection of 3 petitions. It is a collection of 3 petitions. First, there is a petition to rezone the site, the 4.5 acre site, from PUD to C3 fringe commercial. The second is a proposed site plan, which will demolish 2 of the existing buildings and construct a 6-story Hampton Inn hotel and remodel the existing restaurant into a new restaurant. With that site plan, there are planned project modifications to allow increased height and to increase or eliminate the front maximum setback for new buildings. Third and finally, there's a special exception use petition to allow a drive-through facility added to the remodeled restaurant. This collection of petitions were tabled at the November 19th Planning Commission meeting. Recommendation to table was primarily to allow the petitioner additional time to respond to outstanding engineering and forestry, natural resource, landscape comments. But during the course of the discussion, 2 additional concerns were raised by the Planning Commission that focused on the lack of specific commitments to energy conserving design and the lack of active recreation opportunities. The site plan has been changed. The parking lot area has been redesigned to be smaller, increasing the open space, and more specific commitments have been provided about the solar panel coverage on both the hotel and the renovated restaurant. I'll ask the petitioner's team if anyone would like me to add a little bit more, or if you have something more to add. Otherwise, I can move into the staff report.
All seems quiet. Do
Yeah, okay.
you want me to run that, Alexis?
Either way, it's up to you. All right. Probably go to the next slide. So I've reviewed that this is 3 petitions, and this is a summary of the 3 petitions. Next slide. As a refresher, this is the location of the site. We are on the north side of Plymouth Road, just west of the 23 on and off ramps. This is the former site of the Big Boy Restaurant and the Red Roof Inn. Yep, the cursor is pointing to the site. This is an aerial view of it. Now the site has 2 parcels to it. The red roofs are the Red Roof Inn. The whitish roof is the Big Boy Restaurant, which is almost connected to the Red Roof Inn. Now these look like 2 buildings, but actually they are actually 4 buildings down there. There are 2 pairs of buildings that are connected and sort of appear to share a roof. Thanks. Next slide. So this is also in the staff report. This highlights the changes to these site plans. On the left side is the previous layout that was presented in November. And with the red scribble on it, that's the highlighted area that has been changed. On the right side is the proposed site plan before you for consideration. Outlined in yellow is the new curb line, and you can see it's farther back from the service drive. And a little bit of a sidewalk area was added with some seating. So they've lost a few parking spaces, gained some open space, and a little tiny bit of amenity area. They've lost more impervious surface than parking spaces due to the inefficient design of the area currently. So we've got a lot of bang for our buck with this change. For the next slide, as I mentioned previously, part of the reason it was tabled was to provide additional details about the planned project modification justifications. As before, there is increased open space. None is required in the C3 district. They are proposing a minimum of 30% open space to be maintained. They'd also mentioned solar orientation and energy conserving design, but it was a little bit vague. They have worked with their design professionals, and they can commit to 45% of the hotel roof area being covered with solar panels and 25% of the restaurant roof area being covered. We've included these details in the development agreement. It is hard to enforce and monitor how much kilowatt hours that are being produced and used, et cetera, but we can enforce how the percentage and square feet that is covered. So that is the detail that we are putting in the staff report for this project. That concludes my overview of the PowerPoint part. I will refer back to the staff report and mention that our previous staff report, which is attached to today's staff report, described and analyzed the rezoning petition. We also went through a review and analysis of the proposed site plan, and including a detailed description and analysis of the plan project modifications, and as well as the special exception use analysis for the drive-through window. I won't go into them tonight for brevity, but I can if there's any questions that arise. The outstanding comments identified by staff in engineering and in forestry have been addressed with this proposed site plan number 7. And so staff, we are recommending approval of all 3 petitions, including their extra bits, meaning the rezoning petition. We are recommending approval of the site plan and plan project modifications, and we are recommending approval of the special exception use. The proposed motions in the staff report contain a few basic conditions for the plan project modifications and the special exception use. Happy to answer any additional questions if I can. And also, as you can literally see, the development team is here. I believe they can answer questions as well.
Great, thank you. At this time, I would like to open up the public hearing on this item. This is an opportunity for persons to speak up to 3 minutes about the Plymouth Road application. Public comment may be made by calling 877-853-5247 and entering meeting ID 921-1722-6228. The information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand after dialing into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television and background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Oh, we have one indicating interest. Hello, caller with phone number ending 711. You have up to 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission.
My name is Wendy Carmen. I live at 2340 Georgetown in the Orchard Hills Maplewood subdivision, a little over a mile from this property. And in good weather, I walk to this site regularly. In 1978, the Bogus family sold this part of the farm and it was zoned PUD. The supplemental regulations allowed only a furniture store, about 35,000 square feet of motel space, and a sit-down restaurant. These uses were meant to intentionally keep the number of trips at a reasonable level, still allowing the owners to profit from the closeness to the freeway. Although we were worried about left turns out of the site, the traffic on Plymouth Road was a shadow of what it is today, and the plan was to encourage those going east to exit onto Green Road first. As you know, C3 allows many uses and can by right be 4 stories and have 200% FAR. Zoning property to C3 gives the owner a blank check to do anything that is allowed in C3, not just what you see on the plan today. We should not sacrifice safety to give the developers that much flexibility. In 2015, the PUD and its restrictions were upended to allow the western building to be zoned for Plum Market. The neighborhood supported the change, probably not realizing that the zoning would change at the same time. I personally like Plum Market, and I thought it would be fine if they could figure out how to handle the traffic in and out of sight. Perhaps that was a mistake because problems with ingress and egress exist, and because it spurred staff to write this report suggesting C3 is the perfect use for this site. There are already days when the driveway off Green Road has several large trucks and vans blocking the drive, and a few days when delivery trucks have even parked in the center lane out in Plymouth Road. The driveway from Green, used for truck deliveries, also competes with the CVS drive-up window and the entrance to the neighboring medical office building. How can we allow even more delivery trucks serving the rest of the site with the same driveways? How can we contemplate what A20 is proposing and justify any more drive-up windows? How can we afford to create uses that virtually mandate the need for left-hand turns across heavy traffic? This plan needs to be rethought. Instead of giving the owners a blank check for C3, we need to find a plan that will limit these problems. I'm not saying the property shouldn't be upgraded or there shouldn't be a hotel, but I am saying that not all C3 uses or their density are reasonable on this site. I'm saying that the site can't handle the truck traffic it currently has, that the traffic and
30 more
stacking on
seconds, Ms.
Plymouth and Green is already a problem, and you should not be recommending C3 without an enforceable plan to prevent ever-increasing trips to the site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition?
Sorry about that. I don't see anybody else indicating that they would like to speak.
Okay, seeing nobody else, I will close this public hearing. And we have 3 motions here. Does anyone oppose taking up the 3 motions all together? All right, I see one hand opposing it. So let's start with the first, and then we'll move on to the second and then the third, if that order is okay with everyone. So the first motion before us, the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the MMG Plymouth Road mixed-use development rezoning from PUD to C3 fringe commercial. Will I have a commissioner who will move that? Moved by Commissioner Ackerman, seconded by Commissioner Woods. We are in discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner Briggs for actually having us take these separately. I'm guessing it's about the drive-through, and I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have separately, so thank you. It would be great to better understand the traffic patterns, just in response to Ms. Carmine's comments, but before we do, just kind of as a tangent, but an important one, the Shelter Association has moved most of its tenants and clients from the Delana Center downtown to the Red Roof Inn facility for emergency shelter during the global pandemic, to provide for greater distancing between their clients who are without homes. Do we have a sense of project timeline and any impact to the Shelter Association's plans? I think that would be an important piece of kind of community knowledge, and certainly for our nonprofit partners.
Commissioner Ackerman, I do not have an update regarding that. I do know that, of the overall project, only one of the 2 buildings, or one pair of the 2, will be demolished. The other will remain open and standing. The development team is here. They might have a better sense of construction schedule, and I'd have to follow up with the Shelter Association to see what conversations they've had with Red Roof Inn management.
Okay, great. Yeah, it looks like maybe Mr. Butler's screen, someone has a comment.
They might be on mute.
They are not.
Okay.
They may be on mute on their end.
Can they dial into the public comment number and patch through?
Yeah, if you could call the number, Alex, do you want to?
Yeah, let me
read the number and the meeting ID, and they can call in.
Yeah, so the phone number is 877-853-5247. And then the meeting ID is 921-722-6228.
Are they being robbed?
Have them ask them to raise their hand by pressing *9.
And then if you can raise your hand by pressing *9.
So I don't know if this makes a difference, but it looks like he's on here twice.
Yeah.
Like he's still listed as an attendee. So I don't know if that's like the phone part of it.
Here's the 248 number.
Oh. Somebody who raised their hand.
Mr. Butler, is that you with phone number ending 090?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Hello. All right. Can you hear? Hi. Can
Yep.
you hear us?
Yep.
Okay. There we go. Sorry, we were trying to get your attention for a while, and it looks like we're on mute. We apologize. Can anybody hear us now? I heard some comments about the shelter housing people with COVID at our hotel, and I think there was another question as to timeline. So yes, we are housing. We are housing for the Washtenaw County, correct? And our timeline right now is kind of up in the air because of everything. I think our permitting process will be, I think your approval, if you approve us, I don't want to be presumptuous, is about 2 years before we'd have to come back to you folks and ask for it if we do not get a permit and start. So we are looking within that timeline to start once we secure our financing and kind of get a grasp on how the situation is these days. But we will hopefully break ground before the end of the period where this plan is approved. That's the best answer I can give you right now.
What kind of coordination or collaboration would you plan with the Shelter Association to make sure that they, understand these timelines and can plan accordingly? Because the logistics of moving 75 people who need supportive services is tough.
So we've been in constant contact with them on a weekly basis. Right now, they tell us they want it to May 15th. We told them you can have the hotel as long as you like, for as many rooms as you like. We're not in a hurry. Even though we are in some way taking a financial hit on this because of what Red Roof Franchise Corporation is doing to us, but that's okay. So we're in constant contact with them weekly. Right now, they've extended out to May 15th, and we told them if they need it more, just let us know. We're more than happy to oblige. If they need different hotels, we have other hotels in the area that we can service them to, still in Washtenaw County, and they seem to be okay with that.
Okay. Mr. Leonard, yeah.
I just want to, my understanding from talking with county staff is that Red Roof has been a really valuable partner in this. And I was just going to offer, if it's helpful to sort of provide the other side back, I'd be happy to coordinate with the county and provide sort of a summary lens of that as well, should this advance to city council, so that information is available as well.
That would be very helpful, and I think would be very reassuring to colleagues who now.
We also remember keeping up one of the buildings that's not getting demolished, so that can also be serviced for them should they need it, in years from now, I guess. We're only knocking down the building that runs perpendicular to the road. We're not knocking down the building that runs horizontal to the road, and that's about 52 rooms, I believe.
Okay. Yep, that's reassuring. But Mr. Leonard, yeah, if you could nail down some details and the other side of the perspective, just for our reassurance, because we did just last night invest $250,000 into supporting this, so that'd be really appreciated. Thanks. That's all the questions for me from now. I was encouraged to see what's moved in the last months, and curious to hear colleagues' reflections as well.
Further discussion?
May I add, there was a traffic study that was made. I think there was somebody referencing a traffic study. We did submit a traffic study on it.
Traffic study was done by Bergman, was reviewed by the city.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mills, did I see your hand? Yeah, Commissioner Mills.
Thanks. So this first one is specifically on the rezoning, and I'm definitely, I take the point of the caller in terms of like once you rezone it, it's not necessarily tied to this specific site plan. So I think that that's a really good thing for us to talk about, and whether that zoning overall, if we feel comfortable with it, because future things might not look exactly like this. If, there's lots of things up in the air right now. And so, and that zoning decision sticks with the land. It doesn't necessarily stick with this site plan. One of the things that I couldn't find necessarily, that maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place in the staff report, Alexis, is often how the FAR kind of compares to what is allowed here versus what would be allowed under C3 versus, how much based on the site plan that we're seeing is actually what the FAR is of the site plan compared to what would be allowed in C3 total.
Thanks. Had to unmute myself. The site currently has about 12% FAR. It's proposed to be 47%. And as you may know, C3 allows up to 200%.
Thank you. Presumably, I mean, that's quite a big difference, right? So like much more could be built on this site in the future. The horizontal, or the building that runs east-west that is currently staying could then be redeveloped according to the C3 overall zoning in the future. Is that correct?
Yes, it could be. With a site plan, things are subject to redevelopment.
Right. And so the one comfort I think that we have is that all of those things would require relooking. If there's effectively more built there would need to be additional parking, and at some point you're going to run out of space for that. There would also, like, often a concern of neighbors is with additional floor area, right? There's more activity there, and so there's additional traffic. But any subsequent change would require a traffic study. So this is not the only, rezoning to C3 in my mind isn't like unleashing, making it a free-for-all for effectively what happens there. Sure, there are a lot of uses that could be allowed by right, but they would also be subject to coming back and doing additional site planning, and all of that would have to go through traffic studies. Is there something that you could imagine that wouldn't necessarily, that would be effectively a large development there that would not require traffic studies?
No, the only thing I was going to say, the only thing I can possibly think of would be if somehow they're able to renovate the existing buildings, whatever they are, be today or tomorrow. Renovate the existing buildings into a permitted use and wouldn't need to go through the site plan process. However, even if you don't go through the site plan process and are renovating for new uses, you still need to do zoning compliance, and that includes a check of the parking requirements. So most everything that you can think of that's going to be a real change of use, meaning, apples to oranges, would trigger either site plan or the full review of meeting current code.
Got it. From my perspective, like, I think that it's good to think through, like, what I often think of, like, worst case scenario. And I feel like the challenge with thinking about worst case scenario and rezoning is that everybody has a different worst case scenario in mind. But I think often what people are worried about is just something that's going to drive a whole bunch of additional traffic. This is a place that is literally right on the highway, right? Like you can see all of that. And so from my perspective, like, this seems to be the right place for this zoning in particular. And so I think that that's a helpful thing to think about, is like, what else could be here in the future if we do rezone it and this doesn't get built. But I think that zoning actually fits here. So thank you for answering those questions.
Commissioner Abrams.
Thanks. I found Commissioner Mills's perspective really helpful for framing how I might think about it. But one question I had is, like, it seems like the parcels that C3 is appropriate zoning for the parcels, but the zoning of the parcel doesn't take into account the ingress and egress. So in other words, like, what it's adjacent to might make sense in terms of C3, but if it has one point of access that's too narrow to allow proper traffic in and out, that wouldn't be something which would kind of be taken up in zoning, if that makes any sense. So I was wondering, maybe staff could educate me a little bit more about the traffic study itself. In my time on the commission, I have not yet seen a traffic study, which essentially indicated that the proposed development was prohibitive of the development, like that said this site cannot accommodate this development because of the traffic. And I wondered, does that happen, or like what are the how might one mitigate that if in the future the thing that was going to be developed here was going to produce an excessive amount of traffic?
I can mostly address that. There is a traffic study for this. Our traffic studies analyze the new trips and the trip distributions. Also, a side note, I'm not a traffic engineer. I just play one on Zoom. But our requirement, traffic impact studies are submitted. They are triggered when a proposed project will has more than a certain number of trips in the peak hour. I believe it's 50 trips in a peak hour. And when you have that threshold, then you must submit a traffic impact study. Our traffic engineers look at it, and still the bedrock of traffic engineering is level of service and how long are vehicles waiting at intersections. Our traffic engineers are getting better and are definitely moving toward the direction of it's not how long are vehicles waiting at intersections, it's how is all modes of transportation getting around and treated a little more equal. But the bedrock of a traffic impact study is level of service. So it looked at the current traffic conditions at all of the nearby intersections, and took into account what they call background traffic, which is what new development is proposed in the whole area, and then this added in this development proposed in particular. And the study concluded that there will be additional traffic generated from this bigger, newer hotel and the new restaurant. But there's already so much traffic that it's not really statistically significant, or you wouldn't really notice that additional seconds of delay, or I guess it might be fractions of a second compounded. Most of the traffic concerns I've heard tonight revolve not around the hotel, the Red Roof Inn hotel, or even perhaps the proposed hotel, but some of the existing conditions that has to do with loading. And that is probably a function of layout of another site that is adjacent and uses the same private streets and same driveways as this one. Your other comment, I feel like it's been in the past 12 months, but I believe that the Planning Commission did deny a special exception use because of traffic conditions on North Main Street. Usually it doesn't get to this point where the Planning Commission or Council have to deny a project because of the layout, because staff, we work with those design professionals and we say your layout doesn't work. We're never gonna let you get farther. We won't let you go until you fix this circulation issue. And then sometimes we get a traffic impact study that says, yeah, horrible impacts, and this is what we need to do. But as a community, we sometimes push back and we say, to fix the traffic problem means to widen a road to 8 lanes. And we say, thank you, but no thank you. We'll keep our bad level of service.
And I would just add, I think Alexis did a great job responding to all that. I would just add to that a footnote to starting to make sure we're really comprehensively looking at transportation. There are inherent trade-offs in that. If we are to widen streets and put in extremely large aprons and drive accesses, that's going to facilitate loading and vehicular travel. It's going to compromise pedestrian safety and at times non-motorized safety. So I think they do a thorough job, and ultimately, to Alexis's point, we work very hard because we know that balance and that aspect of site plans are of paramount importance to you as commissioners, to the city council, and to the community. And so we work very hard to make sure as many of those issues are resolved as we possibly can.
So thank you. That's very helpful. So I guess the kind of takeaway then would be that the site plan has already taken into account existing traffic patterns and is designed to be as efficient as it can be within the constraints of that site for the expected traffic. And that staff feels confident that that's been done, essentially, right? And yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, on the commission, we often, I think, hear kind of a difference between perception by neighbors of certain problems and congestion and kind of what the traffic report is saying, right? These things are sometimes at odds. So I think it's difficult to think through it, but that information helps. Thanks.
And I would say it's not always perception. You know, we definitely experience congestion in different areas of the city, and that's part of the balance as to how we respond to it.
Yeah, and I would never advocate for widening the road as a mitigating as a way to mitigate it. I just was curious, kind of what it is. Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll come to this later, but obviously the drive-through would be something which contributes to automobile traffic on this site, and so that's probably something we'll continue to talk about this evening.
Further discussion? Commissioner Gabe.
I would just say too, it wasn't very clear in the site plan because they didn't do a zoom out to show how it related to the rest of the site. But there, you know, it comes down and hits Plymouth Road, but then it also connects through past the Plum Market and the CVS pharmacy and exits out onto Green Road, which not for the uninitiated that's never been there before, but for somebody who does know the site, there are actually a couple of ways out through this one that are a little bit different than some of the other sites where they're more landlocked. So there does seem to be, you know, Green Road can get busy too, but Plymouth Road, I think, is the real challenge. Again, that's not shown in their site plan anywhere, but just pulling it up, you know, on Google Maps, you can see that there are kind of back ways out in terms of congestion too.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
So I can actually offer resident perspective as well. I live about a mile south of this site. I go to the CVS and the Plum Market all the time. Side note, that Plum is doing the best job of any grocery store I've seen in this area at all of the social distancing safety stuff for grocery stores. I've been to this site at various times of the day. I've never seen it backed up trying to get back out on the Green Road. It's definitely narrow when you try to go through, like to the Plum and past it, to the parking lot of the old Big Boy. But I don't know. I've really never experienced terrible issues. I think my one concern would be, and we can probably talk about this later with the drive-through too, the left turn out of the site back onto Plymouth Road could get a little bit dicey if there's a lot more cars coming in and out. But even with that, I don't know, I guess I'm, as a resident of this area, not super concerned with what this might do to traffic based on what I've experienced with existing traffic. And I'd just be happy to see something done with this site. So I'll just say that for now about my experiences with the traffic.
All right, further discussion? All right, looks like we're ready for a vote on motion number 1. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And Mr. Lana, should we take a roll call on this, or are you okay with a voice vote?
It'd be my preference to take a roll call when we're taking actual actions on the petitions.
Okay, let's do a roll call then.
Commissioner Woods?
Yes.
Commissioner Briggs?
Yes.
Commissioner Mills?
Yes.
Commissioner Milstein?
Yes.
Commissioner Gibb Randall?
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé?
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams?
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to the second motion, and I will go ahead and read that. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the MMG Plymouth Road mixed-use development site plan and plan project modifications to increase the maximum height to 65 feet 10 inches and eliminate the maximum front setback requirements for new buildings, subject to providing solar orientation and energy conserving design by maintaining solar panels covering a minimum of 45% of the proposed hotel and 25% of the renovated restaurant roof surface, and maintaining a minimum of 30% open space and development agreement. Moved by Commissioner Sauvé, seconded by Commissioner Hammerschmidt. We are in discussion. Commissioner Briggs.
Let's see. God, I'm not on mute anymore. I just wanted to comment that I appreciated the modifications that were done. They seem much more in line with what I would have hoped to see for plan project modification, and so I'm supportive of the changes.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A process question. What if, let's say the special exemption use for a drive-through wasn't permitted in the next motion, what would happen to the site plan?
Thank you.
I believe that the site plan can stand without the use. They'll have a useless driveway, so they may want to come back with it would be a site plan for planning commission to rearrange the layout of the parking lot. But just from a site plan perspective, it functions without the window. It's not like it's a separate building.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? It looks like we are ready for a vote on this. All right. So, Mr. Leonard, if you can do a roll call.
Commissioner Briggs,
Yes.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Gabe Randall,
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Woods.
Yes.
Carries unanimously.
Great, thank you. Moving on to motion number 3, and this is a long one. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission, after hearing all interested persons and reviewing all relevant information, find the petition substantially meets the standards in Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.29.5, Special Exemption Use, and therefore approves NMG Plymouth Road Mixed Use Special Exemption Use for 1 drive-through lane at the freestanding restaurant. This approval is based on the following findings. 1, the proposed use will be consistent with the C3 Fringe Commercial Zoning District, which allows commercial activities accessed primarily by personal vehicles. 2, the site plan is located adjacent to a highway and its access ramps, and the drive-through facility is more appropriate in close proximity to highways. 3, the proposed use will not adversely impact pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, and general circulation based on the location. Plymouth Road and the private street network through the site provide adequate access, and the proposed facility is consistent with the surrounding uses on and adjacent to the site. The special exemption use approval is based upon the following conditions. 1, approval of the MMG Plymouth Road mixed-use development rezoning petition and site plan with planned project modifications. Do you have a commissioner that will move this? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Woods, and we are in discussion. Commissioner Briggs.
Yeah. So I continue to be concerned about the drive-through in this location for a number of different reasons. I think one is actually because of its proximity to the highway. I think it's inappropriate. I think that it encourages a lot of in and out traffic in a location that is particularly dangerous. You know, we have heard some public comment tonight that suggests that there are neighborhood concerns about increasing, encouraging more in and out traffic at that location and kind of conflicts that are maybe already occurring. When I look at, you know, what our criteria are for approval, there are a few a few points that I think are conditions for not approving. I mean, I do think that we as a body should consider drive-throughs in general and determine whether or not they're appropriate anywhere in the city. But one, will be consistent with the general objectives of the city master plan. Obviously, there's a lot of different components, but I think the sustainability framework, which is there are multiple reasons to think that idling and increased encouraging that sort of this sort of traffic movements is not consistent with our sustainability framework. And then, will not be, there's another point, will not be detrimental to the use, peaceful enjoyment, economic value of the development, or development of the neighboring property or the neighborhood area in general. This is drive-through adjacent to a hotel where we should be concerned about air quality to some degree. I mean, I also know it's next to a highway, so there's questions about whether or not that's consistent internally in terms of thinking about it, but we are certainly encouraging I think there's reasons to question it. And then finally, will not have a detrimental effect on the natural environment, which I think in general we should be considering whether or not drive-throughs, I think it will have a detrimental effect. So for those three reasons, I'm not comfortable with supporting it, but I'll leave it open to rest for you guys to discuss.
Commissioner Woods.
I actually am in favor of it, and because actually I think our most recent experiences with the whole COVID phenomena and the way that those things are changing some of our lifestyle leads me to believe that perhaps there are times when it is better to have someone in a vehicle and doing a pickup or something for whatever they're ordering from a business, or in this case, a restaurant, that might be a little bit better situation for our community in general. So, so that's one reason why I would be in favor of it. Also, I know a couple of months ago, we discussed another place where there was a drive-through that was requested. And later on, in talking to different people, some folks brought up to me some situations that I hadn't really thought about in terms of persons who might be driving who are either disabled or unable to get out to go into a business and to get what they want, and that a drive-through affords them that opportunity. I don't want to debate the pros and cons of those kinds of things, but I just wanted to indicate that there certainly are times when drive-throughs may be appropriate. And when I think about whether or not a drive-through is appropriate this close to a highway, maybe that's one of the better places to have drive-throughs, because it doesn't bring so much traffic down into the city and into a little bit farther. I know when, if sometimes when we're traveling, it's easier to do a pull off and to go into a location that has a drive-through or something like that, and not to have to get out of your car and to be able to keep moving. So for that reason, I actually am leaning towards supporting this particular motion.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the consideration and dialogue. I'm torn as well. I understand that drive-throughs have a real positive impact on people's lives, be they disabled or single parents who are in a rush and need to get food, and Panera presents a healthier option than a lot of fast food takeout and drive-through. But I think Commissioner Briggs outlines some valid points that, like, what are we trying to encourage both on this site but also citywide? And if there are real concerns from neighbors about turning movements in and out of this facility, those are going to be exacerbated by incentivizing and encouraging these kind of short 10-minute trips, 15-minute trips to the drive-through, as opposed to the longer stay of a dine-in or a takeout experience. I know that, you know, there are, that impact is hard to quantify, although I'm sure the traffic study did. And I need to review it more closely, but the other elements are, what are we trying to encourage citywide, which is trying to incentivize through both carrot and stick, you know, reduction of carbon emissions, and transportation through single user vehicles is a huge contributor to our carbon emissions citywide. You know, the original PUD was constructed in the early 70s, and so it's been standing for about 50 years now. And as we think about what we want to be building for the next 50 years on this site, you know, it is difficult to say, you know, with our carbon emission goals, as well as just the realities of climate change, that having 50 years of drive-through is a good idea. And so I'm torn as well, but leaning towards no.
Further discussion? Commissioner Mills?
So I am also torn. I would love to see kind of more of the research on how this factors into emissions, really, but also, like, I feel like now is not the time for us to be doing that, those kind of decisions need to, if we're going to be basing our decisions on how this fits to sustainability and carbon neutrality, then I think that goes into re-evaluating drive-throughs entirely. I think that in terms of looking at my reading of kind of a lot of it has to do with the safety around there. And I feel like the arrangement of this particular drive-through definitely does, like, not give cars the priority so much and actually pushes them to the side. I take into it, and also to Commissioner Wood's point about where in the city, if ever there was a place for drive-throughs right next to the highway off, so that's another thing that I kind of keep in my mind. I think one of the points that I've also seen is we don't have very many drive-throughs in the city of Ann Arbor, which I think also, like, my experience has been that the queues are often quite long. And so, and that was also something that a caller had raised, or maybe it was in our packets, thinking through kind of where all of those cars would queue. I think that there actually is space that's, again, kind of tucked into the site. It's not right out on the street. And so I'm not so concerned about the traffic impact that it's going to have on the Circle Drive. What I just have a question for staff about is how, I want to just verify that the arrangement is, or the special exception use for the drive-through is pinned to this site plan. And so it's not just saying that there's always a use comes in, or a different site plan comes in that wants to have a drive-through, they can't put the drive-through on the other side. Is that true?
The special exception use would run with this site plan, and it would be for this restaurant. A different restaurant could come in and then use this drive-through, but say a bank, that's a different use. And this, I'm going to check the staff report as well, but this is for a special exception use for a restaurant's drive-through. So as long as it met that criteria, and any layout changes would need to come back as well, because it is tied to this site plan. But it could be a different type of restaurant as well.
Thanks. I am, even though I'm torn, I'm leaning towards support, and you'll see that in commission proposed business, I think we should put this on our list of, I think looking at drive-throughs is something that I would recommend that we look at again, because this is not, this is going to continue to come up, I feel like. And so I think it might help us as a group review it, not in the context of a specific proposal, but overall.
All right. Further discussion? Commissioner Gabe Randall.
I agree. I think that this should be a policy level discussion, not a specific site discussion. And I would really like to take this on as a larger policy issue. So I think that, you know, when you submit for these things, it's like, you know, years. It takes a long time to get through the process. And so I think when somebody first comes in and talks with staff, you know, staff needs to be able to let them know, like, hey, you got a high bar for drive-through in this town. You know, I mean, so that was probably not communicated because that isn't our policy. You know, so I feel like it's kind of letting them know really late in the game that we're changing on them. So it's still a special exception use. I get that, but I feel like we need to have that larger discussion, and I would be very supportive of having that larger discussion because I completely believe in the things that you're saying, Commissioner Briggs. So I just think that we should have the bigger discussion about it, and so I will support this because of that. And again, I agree also with what others have said about it being close to the highway. I think if it's going to happen, that it makes sense there and not downtown or something like that.
Further discussion? Commissioner Abrams.
Just briefly wanted to share and say that I'm also torn. I kind of agree with all of the comments, but I think this last point about kind of thinking about taking this on at a higher level and not simply trying to take it up in a ad hoc basis, one project here, one project there, I think makes a lot of sense. And given that we recently did approve a drive-through for another project, it would feel inconsistent to me. So I don't love the idea of it, but I plan to vote for it.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Also don't love drive-throughs. Also agree that if there's ever going to be one, this is probably the best place to have it. Also, as a mother of two small children, I can totally see how they can come in handy. My concern, I think, and this isn't really going to sway me one way or another on this permit, but is again the safety issue of people coming from the highway, wanting to go to Panera, going through the drive-through, going to get back on the highway and needing to turn left back onto Plymouth Road to get there. Though as I'm looking at the site plan, the way that the drive-through comes out kind of spits you back out in a way that you could take that through road back to Green and then Green turn left onto Plymouth. So I guess my question is more for staff. Is it ever possible to do like a no left turn onto Plymouth from that driveway? Like who would make those decisions if in the future this just gets to be so popular that there are tons of accidents? And like, is that something that would be like looked at again? Like this would be a very easy place where you're just like, hey, if you want to go back, what direction would it be? Like back to 23, you have to go, out to Green and do that first. Or if you want to turn right on Plymouth Road, that's fine. But is that something that like in the future could come up? Like who would look at that if there are potential issues that come up and there are a lot of safety issues that occur because of what's going on this site?
Our city traffic engineers can right now work with, and I believe that the landowners and all the people who have access to and rights to the Circle Drive, they can put up signage now if they'd like, the wayfinding or, best way to 90, sort of like I think it's the DDA is putting up signs like, go this way to get downtown. They can do that today. Our traffic engineers, they are responsible for our city streets. And I do know that if warranted, they can have traffic control restrictions at Plymouth Road to prohibit the lefts. And I believe that Plymouth is not under MDOT's jurisdiction. So if warranted, our city traffic engineers can control movement there at Plymouth Road. Not on the Circle Drive because it is a private road, although they can consult and help.
Okay, yeah, I actually think there's another shopping center further down where you can't turn left back onto Plymouth. I guess there's probably nothing to do about that now because we don't really know what the impacts are going to be, but it's good to know that that's an option in the future. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Briggs.
Good, so I'm still not muted. So I appreciate the desire to have this discussion, you know, kind of a more global discussion and not be unfair to this petitioner. I would note that this issue got raised, you know, quite a while ago. And so there has already been this discussion here. I don't think it, I hope there was some discomfort with coming back and still proposing a drive-through to some degree. In terms of, I want to just talk a little bit more about why I say in close proximity to the highway, why I think that's problematic. I'm not suggesting that downtown's a better location. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that any place is, but I am particularly, I do think Stadium was a much better location than this location. And the reason is, if you think about it, why is it that we're saying that next to the highway is a better location? Well, we're thinking, okay, when we're traveling and you're Googling where you're going to get, you know, where should you stop and get some food, and you grab, you know, you get off the highway, you pull through, and then you get back on. So what are those movements that we're asking people to do? You know, we're asking people, suggesting that that it's safe that they stop at Panera, and then get back on a highway going 70 to 80 miles an hour while eating food, while driving. I mean, we're encouraging behavior that we recognize is dangerous. And so I think we have to push back on ourselves a little bit about some of those assumptions are that we think, why is this better next to a highway? Because we're accepting the sort of autocentric, you know, patterns. Anyway, larger discussion, but that's the reason I don't think it's great next to the highway. And I was actually thinking about this, Commissioner Woods as well, in terms of the COVID-19 piece, where I agree, we're seeing a lot of restaurants coming, a lot of takeout, and just anecdotally, my son, who is 20, is back from college and does not follow in his mother's footsteps in terms of traffic stuff. So he drove out to Carpenter Road for Starbucks the other day, where he could find the one Starbucks that was open. And his report back to me was that the drive-through line there was 60 cars long or something like that. And he parked his car, you know, did the mobile thing, walked up to the door, somebody brought out their food, you know, brought out his drink, and he got on his way. And so, but there were people wrapped all the way around the building waiting to go through that driveway, when it would actually have been a lot quicker for them to park, call in their order, have somebody walk out. And that's what we're seeing at a lot of places. We're seeing it at Kroger, we're seeing lots of different places. We're not saying that accessibility is not possible. We're not saying that crises, you can't deal with things in a different way. We're just suggesting that maybe the best way that you can do that is, you know, pull into a parking spot and somebody can pull out your food. So I don't think that we necessarily have to worry about that. So, but I understand everybody else's arguments and positions on this, but those are my thoughts on it.
Further discussion? Commissioner Sauvé.
I will say anecdotally, I've seen the opposite on Stadium, one of the banks that has a drive-through. I saw a man standing between two cars getting through the ATM right after COVID, where people are trying to get money because of the issue that you couldn't have access. But I mean, you can do walk up and you can do the thing, you know, it's more about the management of the building than it is about cars versus people. I have concerns about Stadium because it is getting more pedestrian friendly, and adding more cars to it through drive-through I think is more problematic than here. We might be asking people to get off of the highway and on their way home to bring food to their family. It as a park and ride adjacent to it, this is a very car heavy area. So I think we have to understand the kind of modes of transit in different areas of the city. This is a special exception use, is not making a stand to us saying that drive-throughs are for the city. This is not saying that drive-throughs are for C3. This is special exception. So we are reviewing it in a case by case right now. I think Commissioner Randall really kind of brought up the strong point of we need to evaluate this as a policy. And I think we see a lot of policy things that, even though the other one came up in the past year, I mean, we've been talking about parking heat islands and maximums instead of minimums is, you know, a significant thing to sustainability too that hasn't moved forward very swiftly. Things take time and it's worth putting on the agenda, but we have to kind of look at the current condition. So I think for what it is, I support it for this project.
Further discussion? All right, looks like we are ready for a vote. Mr. Leonard.
Commissioner Mills,
Yes.
Commissioner Milstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Gabe Randall,
Yes.
Commissioner Ackerman,
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé,
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams,
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt,
Yes.
Commissioner Woods,
Yes.
Commissioner Briggs.
No.
Motion carries. May I just say one thing?
We are, unless would one of the commissioners like to hear something from the petitioner? We are all set here.
I would like to hear what the petitioner has to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to let you know, I'm a father of 4 children, and I want to see this planet for my 4 children. So when I was here last, I heard you folks loud and clear. If you recall last time, when we did the Panera building, there were no solar panels on the Panera building. I said, you know what, let me try to mitigate as much as I can with this drive-through by putting solar panels. So, I'm the first one who wants to save the planet. Believe me, I want to see my 4 kids enjoy this planet, but we have to do this in a reasonable, smart kind of way. So I thought, how can we avoid this? And I thought if we do solar panels on the Panera and mitigate some of these things, then maybe we can all get a win-win out of this. And that's really what I was hoping to do. And I think, I want to thank you folks for listening in and really reading the materials, and I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we are going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Unified Development Code UDC amendments relative to solar energy systems installation for city council approval. And I see Mr. Kowalski is here. Welcome. You're muted right now, but welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
So we will begin with you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. It's been a while since I saw you all. So it's good to see you in the virtual setting. So I have a couple of amendments here, proposals for tonight. Mr. Leonard's going to be running a slideshow in a minute. So the 2 proposals we have are UDC amendments regarding solar equipment, solar energy systems. These were presented originally back in, I believe it was January or so, to the ORC committee. And I honestly, by now, I kind of forgot who was at that meeting. We did have it at that meeting, so these drafts do incorporate some of those changes. As the staff report says, we did originally plan to present this in March, but obviously that plan was sidetracked a bit. So we will go through the first proposed amendment is really regarding is an exception to the height limits. What this would allow is basically it's an exception for solar panels and solar panels and their supporting structures to exceed the height limit by up to 12 feet. That is for a flat roof. So what this would allow, if we can go to the next, there we go, thank you. So basically, and again, this is only on a flat roof. Right now, currently, as is mentioned, that our height limits are taken to the top part of any feature of a roof, of any structure, whether it's mechanical equipment or architectural features on there. So currently, if you put a solar energy system on top, solar panels on top of a roof, a flat roof in particular, where this is focused, it's typically going to extend beyond the limit of a roof. And as many of you know, we have people that like to get up to the maximum of the height limit, but we're also trying to encourage solar in this area as well. So if we could flip to the next slide, I just have a couple of examples really. Obviously you've seen these all before. The first example, they obviously don't extend that far above the surface of the roof. You can see kind of there's an edge. These are not from Ann Arbor, by the way. Probably many of you can figure that out by looking at that. These do kind of extend a little bit below the parapet around surrounding the edge of the building, but gives you an example. We could go to the next, please. Here, these ones have extended a little bit higher. You can't quite tell from some of the angles of the photo, but it does extend upon the parapet beyond that. Obviously, in this one, it has some other structures that are higher than that. But in the city of Ann Arbor, again, with that slope, if solar panels were the highest structure, we would take the height to the highest point of those solar panels. So in particular that, and again, we really apply this to flat roofs only. So the next example is really why we've gone to the 12-foot limit. So you can see right here is as we're trying to go to encourage the maximum solar coverage, as I said, many of our buildings, the mechanical equipment is on the roof in most cases, in particular downtown buildings and the flat roof buildings tend to have their equipment on the roofs. So this would allow for them to, as you can see in the picture, to extend solar panels above any mechanical equipment. This one was elevated about 9 to 10 feet. I saw some other examples that, you know, again, vary between, they're usually around 10 to 12, usually less than that. So we figured 12 feet does give enough room to allow for any kind of, if there's additional mechanical equipment for those to extend. So again, this is not, I want to stress it's not an exception to the height limits of the downtown. It does not allow you to extend structures up 12 feet. All this would allow is the extension of solar panels and their supporting equipment, as you can see here. So that's, and we can obviously come back for discussion, but I'm going to handle both of the amendments kind of at the same time. So if we can hop to the next one. So the next one is a little bit more involved, but really what it boils down to is an exemption for solar panel accessory structures, things like carports. Again, right now in the city of Ann Arbor, if you install anything, including solar panels, it's greater than 240 square feet on the ground, it's considered an accessory structure and it would trigger site plan. Now, in most cases, that would be an administrative amendment, but not always. So what this amendment would allow would be for solar panels as accessory carport structures to basically cover areas, and we're going to see it. Actually, maybe we could flip to the slides if you don't mind right now. We'll give you some examples of kind of, and I'm sure many of you seen this. This is from kind of a local, if you could recognize on the trash barrels, East Lansing. So one of the largest solar carports in the country. Well, it's installations. I mean, they have it over a couple of lots. So this kind of gives you an example. These vary about 20 feet in height in some cases. They have these at a couple locations around their campus. So this is, again, kind of a larger of an extreme example. We did put a limit in our, in the regulations for a 10,000 square feet, thank you, a limitation of 10,000 square feet. But there's not necessarily a size limit per structure, but the total of all the structures cannot exceed 10,000 square feet. And if you'll see the other standards, yeah, we can flip through the other pictures. Nope, sorry, we can go back to the pictures. Thanks, Brett. The next picture, again, these are just some typical examples, nothing that's earth-shattering, but these are some other things that we were looking at that in the past we've had interest for people adding carport structures at various locations. Now, this is obviously kind of a multifamily setup. So while you could not, just the carport itself would trigger site plan, if you put one up for the express purposes of solar panels under this, you would be allowed to do that. Again, here's kind of a much smaller example, but it does exceeds 240 square feet as well. And then the last example, very similar to kind of what started this proposal. And so again, you see them of various sizes. And Brett, if you could go back to kind of the text language. So thank you. So again, so really what this would allow is if you have an existing parking lot, something like a Westgate, Maple Village, large parking lots that want to construct structures over existing impervious area, this would allow that. It does not, if the construction of the solar energy system it affects any other site plan elements, it does kick it in the site plan. So you can't remove, as you can see here, required landscaping, landmark trees, if you add impervious surface. So basically, if there's anything that would trigger a site plan, it still triggers it. This is only allowing them to put it over existing impervious surface. This really was kind of triggered by a case that was kind of brought forward to us that initially really kind of one of our dealerships in the city wanted to install solar panels for solar vehicle charging and a bit of display as well. And You know, unfortunately, as I told them, while it's not prohibited, you are allowed to do those. It would trigger an administrative amendment. This particular location has not been site planned in quite a while. It truly would be a cost prohibitive activity for them. And really, though, it did start getting all of us as planning staff thinking, in order to bring things in line with kind of our sustainability goals and all those other type items, and looking around through other communities, this does seem like something that could allow and maybe encourage in some cases certain locations to do this. So again, I mean, parking lots, you look like larger installations like Briarwood, the Maple Villages and things like that. So it may allow them to do this even on an incremental basis. So really the bottom line on that one is, it's still any site plan elements that would normally be triggered will still be triggered if the solar installation triggers, if it removes landmark trees, or if it has anything to do with site plan. So I think that kind of in a nutshell covers almost all of it. So I look forward to any questions or discussion at this time. Yes, am I calling or?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Kowalski.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes about the proposed solar energy zoning code amendments. Public comment may be made by calling 877-853-5247 and then entering meeting ID 921-1722-6228. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand after dialing into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments.
Commissioner Mills, my apologies if I somehow booted you out of the meeting when I was doing all the arranging. And Chair Milstein, you did an excellent job. We have no callers on the line.
All right, thank you. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and I will read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the amendments to Chapter 55 Unified Development Code, Section 5.18.4, exemptions to height limits to allow solar panels to exceed height limit, Section 5.16.6N, solar energy systems to waive site plan requirements for construction of solar carports, subject to standards for accessory structures. Do I have a commissioner that will move? Moved by Commissioner Ackerman, seconded by Commissioner Mills, and we are in discussion. Commissioner Ackerman.
I just want to say I think this is great, and thank you to the staff and the ORC for your work in this. It's really appreciated. I feel like these are pretty much no-brainers. Any way that we can add incremental solar coverage in the city, we can, and this is to structures that would already exist or to cover parking lots that already do exist. And I think that makes total sense. Just from a aesthetic standpoint, that's the one point of concern that I could anticipate. Especially like given in 2017, all the debate we had about ground mounted solar in front yards. I fell in love with my girlfriend when I found out she led the advocacy to get her entire high school's parking lot covered in solar panels. And they live in a very like HOA mindset town in California, and none of the neighbors to the high school have complained, and they all appreciate it. And it produces 880 kilowatts of power, so it's pretty cool. And yeah, these things I think it inspire more than they detract from the aesthetic of the community.
Commissioner Gabe Randall.
I too think this is great. There's one thing I want to bring up that has to do with designing these things, which is that by virtue of putting in the posts, you will be non-compliant with the size of the parking space because they have to be a certain width and depth and they don't float magically above. And so I'm wondering if there's some ways that we can still make this work by allowing you to increase the number of compact spaces that you have, because you could have a slim post and comply and make it a compact space. So I get it that you're trying to like really keep the site plan exactly the same, but you're not going to be able to keep it exactly the same if you cover large areas of parking lot with this. The way that they got away with it in the one area in Kerrytown where they put up a few, you know, over there, if you look at the structure for that thing, it's this massive cantilevered thing with big steel I-beams coming out that do not have posts. That is super expensive and is not going to encourage people to necessarily do this. And so if there's some way, I really want this to happen. I think this is exactly the direction we need to go in, but I also think that we need to set it up so that people can actually do this and still comply. So if there's some way to write in language around, that they can change the number of, increase the number of compact spaces that they have in their site plan, or that like, as long as they don't reduce the number of spaces by 1% or some sort of way to be able to allow people to still build these things and comply with our design standards. That's my concern. So just figuring out how we can, because if you imagine, I think what we're all imagining are these huge parking lots like, Briarwood or Maple Village or something like that. Most of those things don't have tons of islands in them in which you can put the posts. You're going to be putting in the middle of a bunch of pavement. And so I just want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up so that people can still comply with what we're, so you see, yeah, see how they have that slim footing there, but that, and you could split the difference and allow it to be 6 inches on either side or something like that. But I just want to make sure that we are cognizant of what we're doing to the dimension of the parking space. See, now they got away with it because they actually, they put their parking spaces. This one was designed with this in mind. And we're really trying to do this as a retrofit situation. I mean, we would love it if people did it, with their site plans too. But I just want to make sure that we're covering our bases in that way, in the way that this thing is written. See, big cantilever. I mean, this is partly because they're trying to, advertise this and show it off, but building that structure is massive, to be able to do it that way. So I just want to make sure that, as we're reviewing all these things, that we're taking all the kind of design aspects into consideration too, so that we are allowing this to move forward in a way that is going to make it, it's going to facilitate its installation for people, so that they, that you're like, oh, all of a sudden you don't have as much, you're not complying with X, Y, Z, and you're going to have to go through site plan. So I just want to make sure that we're covering our bases in that way.
Yeah. Oh, right.
I would just, you can respond to this if you'd like, Matt, but I appreciate that. And I just want to remind the commission, the same question came up with EV parking as well. And so it's I hadn't thought about it in the context of these. I'm glad you raised it, but I think some of the solutions or approaches that you were talking about, maybe we look at compact spaces. Frankly, maybe we look at adjusting the dimensions of our parking spaces. I don't know this to be true, but I would guess that a higher percentage of electric vehicles might be smaller. I know they're not all, but so I think the solutions, the sort of palette of solutions might be the same for both of those proposed ordinances.
Further discussion? Commissioner Mills.
It was my internet connection. It was not you, Mr. Leonard, who bumped me off. Sorry. My question is about the first set, the roof-mounted flat roof solar panels. And I really appreciate the presentation, Mr. Kowalski. as you know, was curious about the height limit going 12 feet above, and then you showed mechanicals underneath. I want to be clear that that would allow for the mechanicals that are associated with the solar panel, solar energy system itself. But as I read the ordinance, you can't use solar panels as an excuse to have other mechanicals that exceed the height limit. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's
okay.
correct.
So in my mind, like honestly, allowing that loophole might actually get us more solar. And so you might, maybe what we have right now is safe, but I would say in the future, that's something that you could loosen. Honestly, if you're like, people are going to want to keep those solar panels relatively low just because, as I mentioned, like they become a sail, right? And it just takes more to anchor them. The other thing though that I thought I would mention is that if we're allowing them to be 12 feet tall, they could be an amenity space. So they could be shade for the roof. That's being talked about actually right now in our state parks about offering some it's on ground, but offering ground mounted solar panels as like shaded picnic areas. And so I think that that is a good height. And I would say that as written right now, it's fine. In the future, if we're not seeing as much solar as we want, again, maybe allowing other mechanicals to be hidden under be an additional carrot that we want to offer to see more roof-mounted solar in the future. So overall, though, I'm super supportive of this, and I really appreciate what Shannon said about the parking spaces too. And I wonder if like we could just maybe that's a tweak to the language about overall number of spaces. Like if we allow for a reduction in number of spaces, we might have problems. But like reduced width of spaces, I think should be non-controversial, or even a language that would say like reduction in number of spaces so long as it doesn't go below our minimums. This kind of gets back to the circular conversation that we talked about before about whether we have parking minimums or maximums. And I don't think we want to pull that into this conversation right now, but for the future, I could happily draft a little amended language to the second one. I just don't know what seems to make sense to people. But I think that those are a couple options, either allowing, compact spaces to count, or kind of what Shannon said about reducing it either by a percentage, or as long as it doesn't reduce the number of spaces to be less than the minimum required.
Yeah, so just generally, as you discussed, my thoughts are, I feel comfortable that we could take that direction from you and progress with this to the next stage with City Council. The intent I'm hearing from you is that making sure that we're thinking about some of the structural aspects and how that relates to our dimensional parking spaces, so that we're sort of like, to Commissioner Gabe Randall's point, we're not creating this option only if you spend a premium structure-wise to accommodate it. So I feel, likewise, I'm not sure what I would suggest in that regard right now. I know that Planner Khan and the Sustainability Office are starting to look at some of those options for EVs. We could approach this kind of two ways. If you are comfortable with us taking that direction and advancing with this, I'm happy to progress with that recommendation. It might result in a little bit of break before it goes to City Council, or on the flip side, we would of course be happy to bring this back to you with that more fleshed out in a little bit more detail.
So can I just ask a question for clarification as well as, because I did actually consider a little bit of the impact of the posts and things like that, and some of the like the ones towards the end of the show, right? The Chevy one that's significantly overbuilt, obviously. So it's a really good point. Would the commission be? I mean, we could build in something. I mean, I think typically when I was looking at the base of many of those, they're not that large, and you can, like you said, kind of split them between the two. I think if we get into the question of modifying any kind of parking, whether compact mounts and things like that, I think it gets a lot trickier and it starts to open up things. However, we could explore that, but is it okay to say we will allow, like some variance in width to these individual spaces? Or is your concern more that people just simply can't use it because of those posts there? Because it maybe make more sense to, the posts can take up as much as 1 foot square, 2 square feet of a parking space. What I'm trying to say is we can allow the post to encroach into spaces rather than mess with the amount of compact or other spaces allowed. Does that make sense? And what are some ideas?
Commissioner Gabe Randall?
So you just don't want to make it so it's difficult to park. And so I think that splitting the difference helps, if each side can absorb it. But there's a reason that your compact spaces are 8 foot wide and your regular spaces are 9 foot wide, because getting less than 8 feet is pretty tricky, because you have to turn to get in, right? So if you can just say something about like, you cannot encroach more than 6 inches into each side, or something. Again, Brett, I trust that you guys can kind of figure out how to be able to take it from here. I think that's fine. But you also just have to be cognizant of, like, it's got to work for a car to be able to pull in there. And the further back it is in the space, the harder it is, because you can't start turning until you get all the way out of that thing. And so if it's really narrow, it's like backing out of a really old garage. You have to stay straight for a really long time. And the way that our dimensions are set up for our parking lot aisles is 22 feet. And that's small. Like, you have to start turning before you come all the way out, because your car is 18 feet long. So like where it's placed, and there are different ways to be able to but maybe just talking to some of the folks from engineering about the issues with turning radii and all that kind of thing. I think you could get it straightened out with that. I trust that you all can figure it out in between now and City Council. But I think that you have the resources on your staff to be able to figure this one out. And I think you probably can get away with it in terms of, like, not necessarily it being a compact space or not in terms of its categorization, but more defining how much you can actually encroach into the space to still make it workable for cars to be able to move in and out of there fluidly and things like that.
We could also make minimum dimensions of the spaces. To cover any spaces, they must be 9 by, so not to allow them to cover compact spaces with it. That gives them an extra foot.
Well, you wouldn't want to do it on a compact space, because then you don't have enough room, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like it has to be in a normal space, and then you could define something about how far you can encroach in either direction, or something along those lines. But again, I think you all have the resources around you to be able to make a good decision with this, and I'm completely fine with you all just running with this and then taking it to council. That's me anyway.
Mr. Leonard, did you have a comment?
I had a question. If the commission could comment, what would be your feedback on if it resulted in a reduction of parking, however, it still met the parking minimum of the site?
That's
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that might be that. That's not going to solve everything, but that might be part of some of the things that we look at. If the site were overparked by 2 spaces and you wanted to convert 2 of them, and they could function in such a way, but maybe they shrunk below our minimum size or something, maybe we could still accommodate in that regard. We're still sort of hitting the goals that we're still on existing impervious surface. We're still going to be meeting the parking minimum requirements for the site. And advancing sustainable options.
Commissioner Sauvé.
So kind of the thing for the parking, what I think this kind of triggers is like an administrative amendment for internal rearrangement of parking spaces. And the only kind of line item it says is no removal of required parking is the language. And so maybe it is just a terminology that you can do internal rearrangement within the project area, as long as it still meets those minimum requirements. So that's one of those kind of like muddy areas that it's not really covered if you can get away, if it's a loophole or not based on this language. It just says that you can't remove parking. So maybe it's that internal rearrangement is kind of part of the language to look at to make sure people can do that without going through the whole administrative amendment process for something like this. I had a question maybe for clarification about the height limit, and to Commissioner Mills' point about tucking other things under it. Like, I like it as an amenity as long as it looks good as an, you know, like you can make pretty rough scaffolding 12 feet high to like have as a pergola for people to hang under, but it could be an eyesore. So there's a little concern about that. But what I understand is it's 12 feet high, but if it's other mechanical equipment, it would still have to meet the minimum height. I guess what I don't want to see is things keeping like building up off each other. So the top of that mechanical equipment still hits the height limit, and now we can just build scaffolding, but the scaffolding could still sit 12 feet above even that mechanical equipment, if that's the height limit. So it's not really kind of nesting in nicely in a way. It would only be if that roof hit the top height limit and then we wanted amenity coverage is what the reason for that 12 feet would be.
Yeah, I don't know how much it would come into a play as an amenity. You probably know this better than I do, but
New
I'm guessing for most rooftop amenities, it's going to be accessed by an elevator overrun. So you're probably, I don't know how much higher you would need to go with solar panels for that particular circumstance. I think this is going to be more probably come into play when a building is really kind of just barely making its height limit with mechanicals or elevator overruns based on what it's trying to accomplish. And then you can't get higher for solar.
Like it's still like a plus 12. Like I'm just kind of like seeing that gap. Like there's always going to be a 12-foot gap between the top of the last thing and the top of the solar at the max point. So there'll always be that margin, and the only thing that would fill that 12-foot margin would be equipment to service the panels.
Yeah, I think
nothing else could fill that gap.
I'd have to double check it, but I think the standard, the project at the corner of William and Main, I think the way that's constructed is the tower portion of that is pretty close to the height limit, so they couldn't put solar panels on that portion. So,
but I was trying to like understand like the 12 feet and what happens in that 12 feet.
Just solar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess like that's more like an angle proposed than it is like if these things are at like 12 degrees, you never really need all 12 feet to get that height. I mean, I think it's okay now. We'll just kind of see how it goes and adapt. Like, I don't think it's critical to adjust at this point, but I just kind of want to talk through like what we're really going to see in that height margin based on this.
Maybe we need to do some more diagrams, Matt, that would just like clearly, we could take a couple of examples about how this may manifest and what would count and what wouldn't count in that.
Commissioner Gabe Randall?
I just want to go back once more to the parking lot scenario, and that is, I think the other thing that's important is to make sure that none of the posts come down in your handicap spaces, so that you put that in there too, because you have to comply, you know, with that in terms of those dimensions. That's regulated way beyond the city, so just make sure that that gets included in the language too.
All right, further discussion? Looks like we're ready for a vote. With the understanding that there's going to be a couple of minor amendments when it gets to City Council. All right, all those, or actually we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Leonard.
Let's start with you, Commissioner Milstein.
Yes.
Commissioner Gabe Randall.
Sorry, yes.
Commissioner Ackerman.
Yes.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Yes.
Commissioner Abrams.
Yes.
Commissioner Hammerschmidt.
Yes.
Commissioner Woods.
Yes.
Commissioner Briggs.
Yes.
Commissioner Mills.
Yes.
A lot of yeses.
Thank you.
Approved. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Collins.
We'll get it refined and hopefully in a really good shape. You guys will be proud of.
I guess I would ask, to the extent you're comfortable, Commissioner Ackerman, you can kind of be a role of checkpoint to make sure that by the time this progresses to City Council, you see that this has been reflected.
Dark in here.
Great. All right, so we are moving on to our regular business. And before us, we have the 2020-2021 City Planning Commission meeting schedule. Mr. Leonard, do we need to vote on this, or is this an FYI?
You need to vote on it.
All right. So I will have a commissioner move our schedule. Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. Discussion on our 2020-2021 schedule. Commissioner Woods.
Just one question. I know that I think Mr. Leonard mentioned earlier that the governor's guidelines might be coming into play and the city guidelines and everything. Do you think that we will be able to, even if it's moved that we can begin to have meetings in City Hall, will we still possibly have this option of Zoom for those who might not feel comfortable coming to City Hall? Or even for the public that might want to call in and not come to City Hall?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to follow up on that. I can tell you generally, the city has been learning a lot from Zoom meetings, and we actually see the possibility of incorporating this by choice, not out of necessity. In some circumstances, I think it's much more accessible for people to be able to participate via from your home, as opposed to having to come to City Hall, and perhaps it's a little bit more challenging to multitask while you're waiting for a particular agenda item to come up or something. So a lot of things are at play in that regard. The city has traditionally taken steps and policy directions that all meetings, whether they legally have to comply with the Open Meetings Act or don't, do take steps to comply with the Open Meetings Act. A great example of that is we post the Ordinance Revisions Committee meeting to meet Open Meetings Act. That's a committee meeting. The OMA would not typically require that to meet the same publication requirements as the full Planning Commission. But the city's always done that from a lens of and a desire to be as transparent as possible. And so as to your specific question about if the governor's or a lot of it comes down to the governor's order and what is allowed and not allowed. I would have to follow up to what extent the city has made any determinations that incorporating Zoom as part of an in-person meeting would still be compliant with the Open Meetings Act. Right now, this is compliant specifically because of the governor's order. And if that order were to expire without any extensions or modifications, my understanding is that we have to go back to in-person meetings. But I'll follow up on that question. And if I don't share it prior, I'll definitely share it with the next commission meeting.
Also, just some perspective, Mr. Leonard, I don't know if you caught, but Mr. Postma, the city attorney, is going to be providing the city council with advice on that subject and hopes to give us an update by Friday.
Oh, so, great.
Mr. Leonard, I can't send that to you without permission, but if you want to request that same feedback, we should be getting it soon.
Okay.
And then I can also just float to city council colleagues. We have like a policy agenda committee that writes resolutions advocating for certain state level policies. And while I can't convince Governor Whitmer to do anything, we could at least kind of formalize our support for that with a letter, an official letter or something, if city council wanted to take that up. So I'll forward that, because you raise a very valid point that just because the laws go away doesn't mean that the virus does.
And in the meantime, I would just add, we've really tried to expand our method. So we now have our e-comment, which previously was only provided for city council agendas, in addition to email and public speaking. it's modest. I'll provide you, but we have, regardless of how the meeting is conducted, we've tried to open up the ways that we can hear from people for feedback on particular petitions.
Commissioner Briggs?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Commissioner Wood's recommendation also around public input, even if it doesn't work out for us to not be there in person. I think having this open for public engagement, is something that we could do, and actually something I think we should consider doing for a long time, even if we don't get a lot of folks that end up taking advantage of it. I've noticed as I've been watching more public meetings that it's nice to feel like you have an option to comment at 1 o'clock in the morning, should you choose to do so. Not that we meet till 1, hopefully.
It hasn't happened in a couple of years, but it has happened. Any further discussion on our calendar for 2020 through 2021? Seeing no one. Mr. Leonard, are you okay with a voice vote for this one? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, it is approved. We now move on to audience participation. And at this time, this is an opportunity for a person to speak for up to 3 minutes in regards to anything at all. Public comment may be made by calling 877-853-5247 and then entering meeting ID 921-1722-6228. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. In order to electronically raise your hand after dialing into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address for the record at the beginning of your comments. Do we have any comments? All right.
No callers on the line.
Thank you. Moving on then to commission proposed business, and I believe Commissioner Mills had something for us.
Mr. Leonard, could you please add a discussion about drive-throughs and as special exception uses to our list of things, ordinances to consider? And excellent. I'm thinking, this is something that, ultimately would be an ORC decision, but I think that there's enough interest that maybe it's a working session.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Further discussion or any further commission proposed business? Mr. Leonard.
I just wanted to tell you, I really appreciate the conversation. I continually to be impressed by the time and the fact that you're committed to public service and taking on this role, which is very challenging. And I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the discussion tonight. Everybody, I thought, brought a lot of thoughtfulness and passion, and I just kudos. I really appreciated hearing you work through some of those issues. I know a lot of you were torn, as you said, on a couple of the aspects of that, but I'm just reminded what a terrific commission that the city has. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your leadership, Mr. Leonard. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you. Any other commission proposed business? Seeing none, I will take a motion to adjourn, moved by Commissioner Randall, seconded by Commissioner Abrams. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.